Hi everybody, my name is Kate Paisani and I am the Director of the Center for Advanced Research on Language Acquisition, also known as CARLA, and we are publishing the proceedings from the 2017 Second Language Acquisition Graduate Student Symposium. I'm doing this screencast to talk to you a little bit about the process for reviewing manuscripts for inclusion in the symposium proceedings. So instead of showing you how to actually review a manuscript, because there are samples in the on the web page that your colleagues are going to share with you, we thought it would be useful to actually talk about the process as a way to help you in your task to review the manuscript that you've been assigned. So when I receive a manuscript that I've been asked to review for a journal or for an edited collection, there are a couple of things that I do first. I look at the actual call for papers to kind of get an idea of what was expected of the manuscript authors. So what you see on the screen here is a copy of the call for proceedings from the Graduate Student Symposium. And you can see when you look at this, I'll make it a little bit bigger, that there isn't really very much in here about the content of the submissions. So it talks more about contributing to the scholarship in the field of SLA, or synthesizing and theorizing about existing literature, and reporting on research in progress. So these are all really general guidelines. I might also look at the description of the conference to get a better idea of what the focus was. And so here you can see that the purpose is to address new and future studies addressing current issues in SLA. The topics are language teaching and learning, research, education, and their attendant social, psychological, and linguistic implications. So I know based on looking at this that this is a fairly broad symposium and that the call for papers is really broad. So there's no theme that I need to worry about when I'm reading through the manuscript. The second thing that I do is I look at the reviewer evaluation form. So I'll make this a little bit bigger too so you can see it. So here I just read through the instructions, and then I look specifically at the different rubrics that I'm supposed to be attending to as I review the manuscript. So I see that I have 3 options for my recommendation, and I'll talk about those in just a minute. And then there's a place for me to do ratings. So in this particular reviewer form, there's a 5-point Likert scale, and then there is a comment section for each segment of the review. So the first segment of the review basically wants you to give an overall assessment of the manuscript. So this would be a place where you would say, this manuscript addresses X topic, the authors do Y, and it contributes to the field of second language education or second language acquisition in the following ways. In the second section of the reviewer form, how well does this literature review inform the research? So every paper, regardless of whether it's a study or a lit review or a work in progress, it's going to do some kind of a literature review. And so you can speak to that there. How well are the research design, procedures, and statistics explained? So this is going to be significant for an actual empirical study. How appropriate is the description of the purpose, methods, procedures, and/or analyses? So here this type is for any type of paper. It can be an empirical study, or it can be a review of the research, or a position paper. And then how clear is the writing, including tables, figures, and examples? So this is related to organization. It's related to the way that the author expresses him or herself. And so I know I need to be attending to all of these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 specific areas as I read. And then there's a place for other comments. So this might be a place where you make some more general suggestions or a comment on something that isn't covered in those 5 initial rubrics. And then there's also a space for you to provide confidential remarks to the editors. So when I review manuscripts, this is often a place where I will point out that it's clear that the author maybe isn't a first language speaker of English and would require some more editing work. I might also, if there's a paper that has some really egregious misrepresentations or errors, I might state that more forcefully to the editors than I might to the author, so that the editor can make a decision about how to share that information, if at all, with the author or authors of the manuscript. In regards to the Likert scale rating here, so as I said, you need to require a Likert scale rating as well as comments. I would think about this in terms of 5 as being outstanding or excellent, and as 1 being very poor or something that isn't addressed at all in the manuscript, and then the other scale, sort of the range in between those two things. So when I receive the manuscript, after I've read through the call for papers and I've looked carefully at the review form, I then suggest that you read the manuscript twice. So read it once for your overall impression of the manuscript, and you can even then get a general idea of whether you want to choose accept as is, accept with revisions, or reject. And then I suggest reading it over a second time for more specific comments and feedback based upon the 5 rubrics in your reviewer form. I think since many of you may be inexperienced manuscript reviewers, doing this 2-step process would be helpful for you. I honestly don't do that anymore because I've been reviewing manuscripts for many years now, but I do think it's helpful to get an overall feel for the manuscript before thinking about feedback on a detailed level. In terms of your recommendation, so whether you're going to decide to accept a paper as is with revisions or reject, typically papers are not accepted as is. Every paper is going to need a little bit of work. So it's really what you want to be thinking about, and what might be challenging for you is thinking about the difference between accepting with revisions as noted and rejecting a paper. And in determining that, it's not necessarily the number of changes that need to be made to the manuscript that can inform your decision, but rather the quality or lack of quality in the paper in relation to the changes, and the feasibility of making those changes in relation to the areas, the rubrics on your review. Certainly, if you give a lot of ratings that are 1 or 2, in your Likert scale, then it's likely that that kind of a paper would need to be rejected. But probably a lot of what you're going to be reviewing will be accept with revisions, and just keep in mind as you make your decision, it's more the quality of the needed revisions as opposed to the quantity that should help you make your decision. So just the last thing, a little bit of advice as you go through the review process. Things that are really important when you're reviewing a manuscript are to keep in mind that this person is a colleague, whether you know this person or not, whether you're reviewing for the SLA Student Symposium Proceedings or for a journal. On some level, this person is your colleague. So you want your comments to be fair. And to make your comments fair, it's important that they be constructive, so that the author can use those comments to help make the manuscript better, whether it's to be resubmitted to the same venue or to be submitted someplace else. And it's also important for your comments, when you're thinking about the fairness of your comments, it's important to consider the venue where the manuscript is going to be published. So this is a proceedings, which means that the publication process is a little bit less rigorous. With a peer-reviewed journal, you would take different things into consideration in terms of the kind of feedback that you would provide and the kind of rating you would give to the paper. So fairness is really important. And then the other thing that's really important in providing a good manuscript review is being thorough. As an author, it's always a little bit frustrating when you receive feedback from a reviewer and it just says the paper is great, the author should do X, and the X is kind of vague. It's really good to get thorough and detailed feedback that sort of contributes to how that feedback is constructive, which is, as I said, also a very important piece of advice. So keeping in mind fairness and providing thorough comments, it's a really good way to provide a a good review that's going to be helpful to an author. And I guess the last piece of advice then is just to remember that the purpose of this is not only to evaluate the academic soundness of the author, that the manuscript that you're reviewing, but also to be a helpful colleague. This is really a service that you're doing to the profession, and in doing this service, you're trying to make the profession better, and you're specifically trying to help a colleague improve his or her research. So good luck, and I hope that this was helpful to you.